The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for longer than humanity had known they existed. Made up of 17 different alien species, the Concord controlled trade, law, and peace across the Orion Arm. They saw themselves as wise, ancient, and fair. To them, humans were newcomers, loud, emotional, and dangerous. For 50 years, Earth had been allowed to sit at the edge of their meetings, but never at the main table. Humans were on probation, watched closely, judged harshly. Now they had been summoned. The message came without warning. A priority hail from Viridia Prime, the floating citadel where the Concord held court. Earth's leaders knew what it meant. Tensions had been rising for months. A human freighter, the Skyward Hope, had vanished near the Helios expanse. Scans later showed wreckage and energy traces matching Cathari weapons. The Cathari were one of the oldest Concord members, proud and rigid with a long history of looking down on younger species. When Earth demanded answers, the Cathari claimed the freighter had crossed into restricted space and ignored warnings. No proof was offered. No bodies were returned. Earth's government sent a formal protest. The Concord ignored it. Then came the summons. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Aurora Dawn, watching Viridia Prime grow larger through the viewport. The citadel was massive, a ring of gleaming silver and blue spinning slowly against the black. It looked peaceful, but Daniel knew better. He had fought in the border skirmishes 10 years ago. He had seen what peacekeeping really meant when the Concord decided who was right and who was wrong. Beside him, Ambassador Lisa Moore adjusted her jacket. She was calm on the outside, but her fingers tapped once against her thigh, a small sign of nerves. Lisa had spent 20 years negotiating with aliens who barely saw her as equal. She knew this meeting would not be fair, but she also knew Earth could not afford to look weak. "They'll try to shame us," she said quietly. "They always do," Daniel nodded. "Let them talk. We have the logs. We have the wreckage. Truth is on our side." Lisa gave a thin smile. "Truth doesn't matter if no one wants to hear it." The Aurora Dawn docked without fanfare. No honor guard. No welcome. Just a cold, sterile airlock and 2 armored Mer sentries. Tall, insect-like beings with smooth black carapaces and glowing red eyes. They scanned the humans without speaking, then gestured toward the transit tube. Inside the citadel, everything was too clean, too quiet. The walls hummed with hidden energy. Gravity felt slightly off, as if the whole place was tilted just enough to make visitors uneasy. Aliens of all kinds moved through the halls, some on legs, some on wheels, some floating in anti-grav bubbles. None looked at the humans. Or if they did, it was with a glance that said, "You don't belong here." The council chamber was a vast dome of polished stone and light. 17 thrones rose in a half-circle, each shaped for a different species. At the center sat High Arbiter Vexil of the Lumen, a tall, pale being with silver eyes and a voice like wind through glass. The other members sat in silence, their expressions unreadable behind masks, shells, or veils. Daniel and Lisa stood on the floor below, alone, exposed. "You are late," Vexil said, though their ship had arrived exactly on time. "We came as soon as we were called," Lisa replied, her voice steady. "The Concord does not call. It commands." A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber. Daniel kept his hands at his sides, but his jaw tightened. The Cathari delegate, a broad-shouldered figure with armored skin and glowing orange eyes, stepped forward. "The humans continued to spread lies about our actions near Helios. Their freighter trespassed. It was warned. It was destroyed. This is not a matter for debate." Lisa activated her data pad. "We have recovered debris from the Skyward Hope. Scans show it was hit by Cathari plasma torpedoes, fired without warning, without hails, without reason. Our crew sent 7 distress calls before the ship went dark. None were answered." The Cathari laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Primitive recordings can be faked. Human emotions cloud your judgment. You see aggression where there is only order." Vexil raised a hand. "Enough, the Concord has reviewed the evidence." The Cathari acted within their rights. The Helios expanse is a protected zone. Human vessels have no business there. "That zone was never marked on any official star charts," Lisa said. "We were hauling medical supplies to the colony on Epsilon 9. The route was approved by Concord Traffic Control." "Approved by low-level clerks," Vexil corrected. "Not by the council. Your presence was a violation." Daniel spoke for the first time. "So you let a ship full of doctors and engineers die?" "Because of a clerical error. Silence, then Vexel turned fully toward them. Humanity has been given great patience. You build warships in secret. You refuse to share your jump drive schematics. You question every ruling. You act as if you are equal to us. We are, Daniel said simply. The word hung in the air like a spark in dry grass. Vexel's eyes narrowed. You are children playing with fire. The Conquered has decided. Earth will stand down its military fleet within one solar cycle. All defense commands will be placed under Conquered supervision. Your shipyards will be inspected monthly, and you will pay reparations to the Cathari for the cost of the engagement. Lisa's voice was ice. You're punishing us for being attacked. We are restoring balance, Vexel said. Fail to comply, and Earth will be cut off from all interstellar trade. No fuel, no parts, no aid. You will be isolated. The verdict was final. No appeal, no discussion. As they walked back to their ship, Lisa stared straight ahead. Daniel watched the alien faces around them, some pitying, some smug, all certain that humans would obey. But Daniel knew better. He had seen the way the Concorde ships moved during drills, slow, predictable, relying on old tactics. He had studied their tech during trade talks, impressive but stagnant. And he remembered the whispers from Earth's hidden labs, the quiet breakthroughs no one outside the inner circle knew about. They thought humans were weak because they asked for peace. They didn't realize humans only asked once. Back aboard the Aurora Dawn, Lisa sent a coded message to Geneva. They gave us an ultimatum, 1 year to kneel. The reply came within minutes. Then we'll stand tall before the year ends. Daniel looked out at the stars, not with fear but with quiet resolve. The Conquered wanted obedience. Humanity would give them war. News of the Conquered's ultimatum spread fast. Within hours, it was on every screen on Earth. People gathered in city squares and homes and underground transit hubs, watching the replay of Lisa Moore's grim face as she stepped off the shuttle in Geneva. The Conquered had given humanity 1 year to surrender its fleet, hand over its shipyards, and pay for the crime of being attacked. Most citizens had never heard of the Helios Expanse or the Cathari before. Now those names burned in their minds like brands. Protests erupted from Cape Town to Vancouver. Students marched with signs that read, "We are not slaves" and "No surrender." Veterans stood in silence outside government buildings, their old uniforms pressed and clean. But in the quiet places, the deep bunkers beneath the Alps, the orbital command centers hidden in asteroid shadows, another kind of response was taking shape. General Owen Carter sat in the war room of Earth Defense Command, his hands folded on a table made of recycled lunar steel. Around him, holograms flickered, fleet positions, resource flows, ship production rates. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, like a hawk watching a storm gather. He had expected this, maybe even hoped for it. For 50 years, Earth had played the obedient student. While the Concord bragged about their ancient wisdom, humanity had been learning in silence. They studied alien wreckage from old battles. They reverse-engineered captured sensors. They pushed their own science further than anyone knew. The public saw sleek passenger liners and mining drones. They didn't see the black-hulled destroyers being built in the dark side of Titan, or the AI cores trained on millions of simulated battles. Owen tapped a key. A new image appeared, a ship unlike any the Concorde had ever seen. Sleek, angular, wrapped in a skin that bent light and radar. "Project Nightshade," he said. 12 of them are ready, 20 more in 3 months. Captain Daniel Hayes stood near the back of the room, arms crossed. He had returned from Viridia Prime 2 days ago, and hadn't slept since. "They think we're bluffing," he said. "They think we'll fold when the trade routes shut down." "They don't understand us," Owen replied. "They see emotion as weakness. But our anger, our grief, our stubbornness, that's our strength. They've never faced a species that fights for each other, not just for power." Lisa Moore entered then, her coat still damp from the rain outside. She carried no files, no pads, just the weight of what she'd seen in the Conquered chamber. "The assembly is divided," she said. "Some want to negotiate. Others say we should comply to avoid war." Owen shook his head. "Compliance is slow death. Once they control our ships, they control our future. We either stand now or we kneel forever." Lisa looked at Daniel. "What do you think?" He thought of the skyward hope, of the medical supplies meant for sick children on Epsilon 9, of the silence after the last distress call. "We don't start the war," he said, "but if they force our hand, we end it fast." A plan began to form. Not a reckless charge, but a careful, quiet buildup. Earth would appear to obey on the surface. Trade talks would continue. Inspectors would be welcomed at civilian yards. But deep in the Kuiper Belt, hidden behind ice and signal jammers, Project Titan would grow. It wasn't a weapon. It was a shield and a trap. Meanwhile, humanity's best engineers worked day and night. They perfected phase shield generators that could absorb plasma fire. They linked pilots' minds directly to ship controls through neural lace, cutting reaction time to milliseconds. They built drones that could mimic human ships, drawing enemy fire while the real fleet moved unseen. On Luna, workers in pressurized domes welded hull plates with steady hands. In orbit around Mars, AI-guided factories spun out missile pods by the thousands. No one complained about the long shifts. No one asked for overtime. Everyone knew what was at stake. Back on Earth, the public saw only calm. The government released statements about constructive dialogue and peaceful solutions. But in schools, children learned emergency drills that included space evacuations. In hospitals, blood banks filled beyond capacity. In every home, families checked their emergency kits just in case. Daniel spent his days aboard the Iron Resolve, the first of the new dreadnoughts. It felt alive under his feet, humming with power. The bridge was small, efficient, built for speed, not ceremony. His crew was young, sharp, and fiercely loyal. They didn't salute much. They didn't need to. They trusted him because he trusted them. One evening, as Earth rose over the lunar horizon, Daniel stood alone on the observation deck. He thought about his father, who had worked in a shipyard during the early colony days. "We build so others don't have to fight," the old man used to say. But sometimes, Daniel knew, you had to fight so others could keep building. Lisa, meanwhile, traveled to neutral systems, places like the Mirror Hive clusters and the Thalassian coral rings. Officially, she was there for trade talks. Unofficially, she was planting seeds. She showed the Mir footage of Conquered enforcers destroying their outposts years ago. She reminded the Thalassians how the Conquered had blocked their request for clean water tech, after their oceans turned toxic. Slowly, quietly, she built a network of sympathy, if not allies, then at least witnesses. The Concord noticed nothing. They were too busy celebrating their victory. In Viridia Prime, the Cathari toasted their success. The Lumens spoke of a new era of order. They believed humanity was broken, they were wrong. 3 months passed. Earth's public posture remained humble. But beneath the surface, the storm grew. The first Nightshade-class ships completed their trials. Neural lace pilots scored perfect runs in simulated fleet battles. And deep in the void, Project Titan's final components clicked into place, a ring of quantum mines. Invisible, undetectable, waiting. Then came the breaking point, a conquered peacekeeping flotilla, led by the Cathari commander Zorath, arrived at Proxima Centauri. The colony there was small, mostly farmers, teachers, and engineers. They had no military base, only a local defense grid for meteor protection. Zorath demanded they shut it down, calling it a violation of Concord security policy. The colony refused. They had the right to protect their homes. Zorath gave them 1 hour. When the hour passed, his ships opened fire. Not on the grid, on the habitats, on the schools, on the hydroponic farms that fed 10,000 people. 2,000 died in the first strike. The footage reached Earth before the smoke cleared. A child's toy floating in vacuum. A shattered window with a frozen hand still pressed against it. Silence where voices should have been. This time there was no debate. The United Earth Assembly met in emergency session. Every delegate stood when the vote was called. Unanimous. Sovereignty would be defended. Lisa sent a final message to Viridia Prime. Not a plea. Not a threat. A statement. You sought to break us with fear. Now you will learn what happens when you push humanity too far. And within hours, the Aurora Dawn, now flanked by 11 black Nightshade ships, jumped to Proxima Centauri. The Conquered thought they understood war. They had never seen human wrath. The jump to Proxima Centauri was silent. No fanfare, no warning. One moment, space was empty. The next, 12 human ships hung in the dark like wolves emerging from fog. At their center, the Aurora Dawn, once a diplomatic vessel now refitted with gravitic cannons and phase shields, led the formation. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the main display. Below them, the Cathari flotilla orbited the broken colony. Their ships bloated with arrogance, their weapons still warm from the strike. Commander Zorath's flagship, the Iron Maw, was a hulking brute of old Concord design, armored, slow, built to intimidate, not to fight. He had expected fear. He had expected surrender. He did not expect humans to show up with warships he had never seen before. "Hail them," Daniel said. The comms officer opened a channel. "This is Captain Daniel Hayes of Earth. Stand down your weapons and prepare to surrender." Laughter crackled over the line. "You bring toys to a war, little mammal," Zorath growled. "Leave now or join your colony in silence." Daniel didn't answer. He gave a single nod. The Nightshade ships moved. They didn't charge. They didn't fire wildly. They slipped through space like shadows, using micro-jumps and gravity slingshots to appear in blind spots. The Cathari sensors, built for large, slow targets, couldn't track them. Before Zorath could react, two of his escort cruisers vanished in silent flashes. Hit by rail slugs moving at near light speed, their cores melted before alarms could sound. On the Iron Maw, panic spread. "Where are they coming from?" Zorath roared. "They're everywhere," a technician whispered. Daniel watched the battle unfold on his screen. His pilots weren't just flying, they were thinking as one, linked through neural lace to a shared combat AI. Every move was precise. Every shot counted. A Cathari destroyer turned to fire, only to find a Nightshade ship already behind it, slicing its engine array with plasma cutters. Another tried to retreat, only to be caught in a gravity net spun by the Aurora Dawn, freezing it in place like a fly in amber. Within 3 minutes, the battle was over. The Iron Maw floated dead in space, its weapons offline, its engines dark. Zorath sat on his command throne, stunned as human boarding pods latched onto his hull. He had expected to crush a mouse. Instead, he had stepped on a hornet's nest. On the colony below, survivors watched from cracked domes and emergency shelters. They saw the Cathari ships go dark. They saw human vessels move with calm purpose, not rage. Rescue shuttles launched from the Aurora Dawn, heading for the damaged habitats. Med teams in pressure suits stepped onto the surface carrying oxygen, water, and hope. Lisa Moore arrived 2 hours later aboard a fast courier. She walked through the ruins with her head high, speaking softly to survivors, recording names promising justice. She didn't gloat. She didn't shout. But when she looked up at the silent Cathari flagship, her eyes were hard. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Not just the victory, but how it was won, clean, fast, no civilian harm, no unnecessary destruction. Humanity hadn't lashed out in blind anger. They had struck with control, with purpose. That scared the Concord more than any explosion ever could. In Viridia Prime, the council chamber was in chaos. The Lumen demanded immediate retaliation. The Mer delegates stayed silent, watching. The Thalassians requested emergency session. For the first time, the Concord's unity cracked. But Earth wasn't done. General Owen Carter activated Phase 2. While the world celebrated Proxima, hidden fleets moved. From the asteroid belt, from the dark side of Neptune, from secret docks buried in Martian canyons, human warships emerged, not to attack but to position. They took up silent posts near key Concord relay stations, shipyards, and fuel depots. Not threatening, just present, like guards taking their posts. Lisa returned to Geneva and addressed the United Earth Assembly. "We showed them we can fight," she said. "Now we show them we can win." The Concord sent a message demanding Earth withdraw from Proxima and return Zorath unharmed. Earth's reply was simple. He will stand trial for war crimes. The Concord may send observers. The offer was refused. Instead, the Concord began mobilizing. Fleets gathered at the Helios Rift, the narrow corridor between human and Concord space. Over 300 ships, cruisers, carriers, dreadnoughts formed a wall of metal and fire. They called it the Shield of Unity. They believed it was unbeatable. Daniel studied the intel with Owen in the war room. "They're gathering all their strength in one place," he said. "They think we'll hit them head on." Owen smiled faintly. "Good. Let them think that." Deep in the Kuiper Belt, Project Titan powered up. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a field of quantum singularity mines, tiny points of warped space invisible to sensors, harmless until triggered. Once activated, they would bend gravity itself, tearing ships apart or swallowing them whole. The conquered had never seen anything like it. They didn't even know to look for it. Meanwhile, human diplomats reached out to neutral systems again. This time, they didn't just whisper. They showed footage of Proxima. They shared data on conquered abuses. The Mir, long tired of being treated as second class, began moving their own ships toward the border. The Thalassians opened their ports to human supply lines. The galaxy was watching. And for the first time, it wasn't looking at the conquered with awe. It was looking at humanity with respect. Daniel returned to the Iron Resolve, now fully operational and waiting in high orbit. His crew was ready, not eager for blood, but ready to protect what they loved. As he stepped onto the bridge, he saw a small photo taped to the console, a child from Proxima holding a rescued pet, smiling through tears. He touched the edge of the frame gently. Then he gave the order. All ships, prepare for jump. Destination Helios Rift. The Concorde thought they had built a wall. Humanity was about to show them it was made of sand. The Helios Rift was a narrow stretch of space between two dying stars, where gravity twisted in strange ways and sensors often failed. The Concorde chose it as their final stand, believing the chaotic fields would hide their numbers and confuse human tactics. Over 300 ships waited there, massive carriers bristling with fighters, ancient dreadnoughts armored in centuries of conquest, and swift destroyers painted with the emblems of 17 proud species. At their center floated the Sovereign Will, the Concorde's flagship, commanded by High Arbiter Vexil himself. They expected a desperate human charge. They expected chaos. They expected victory. What they got was silence. For 3 full days nothing came. No signals, no scouts, no challenge. The conquered fleet grew restless. Patrols found no trace of human ships. Scans showed empty space. Some commanders whispered that Earth had lost its nerve. Others feared a trick. Vexil remained calm, but even he checked the star charts twice. Then on the 4th morning it began, not with a blast of weapons, but with a flicker in the gravity field. A ripple barely noticeable. Then another. The conquered sensors blinked. False readings, they thought. Glitches from the rift's strange physics. But the ripples grew stronger. Space itself seemed to shudder. On the Iron Resolve, Daniel Hayes stood calm on the bridge. Around him, his crew moved with quiet focus. No shouting, no panic, just steady hands and sharp eyes. Project Titan is online, the science officer reported. All minds primed. Trigger sequence ready. Daniel nodded. Wait for my mark. Far below, hidden behind the gravity shadow of a dead neutron star, the human fleet waited. Not 300 ships, but 60. Sleek, fast, and loaded with everything Earth had. They didn't need numbers. They had something better. Knowledge. The conquered still didn't understand. They thought war was about size, about noise, about showing force. Humanity knew war was about timing, about control, about knowing when to strike and when to wait. Then Daniel gave the order. Activate Titan. Across the rift, the quantum singularity mines flared to life, not with light or sound, but with a silent warping of reality. Space bent, gravity twisted. The Concorde fleet, so proud and so still, suddenly found itself caught in invisible currents. Ships listed sideways. Engines failed. Navigation systems screamed in confusion. A Cathari cruiser vanished first, sucked into a micro-black hole no larger than a house, gone in less than a second. Then a Lumen carrier tore itself apart as its front and back were pulled in opposite directions. Alarms blared across the conquered fleet, but it was too late. The trap was sprung. Now the human fleet moved. The Nightshade ships jumped in from all sides, not in a wave, but in precise pairs. They targeted command vessels first, cutting off coordination. Gravitic cannons fired pulses that scrambled shields. Rail slugs punched through hulls like paper. The conquered tried to form up, to fight back, but their formation was already broken. Their pride was shattered. On the Sovereign Will, Vexil shouted orders that no one could follow. Raise shields. Launch fighters. Fall back! But the ship's engines sputtered. A singularity mine had wrapped its gravity around the drive core. The flagship was trapped. Daniel watched it all from his screen. He felt no joy. No hate, only duty. He saw a Mir frigate trying to flee, and ordered his pilots to let it go. They've suffered enough under the conquered, he said. Let them carry the truth home. One by one, conquered ships fell. Some exploded. Some drifted dead. Some surrendered, their crews broadcasting pleas over open channels. Human rescue ships moved in immediately, pulling survivors from escape pods, offering water, medical aid, dignity. Even in victory, humanity showed mercy, but only to those who asked for it. The battle lasted less than an hour. Of the 300 Concord vessels, only 17 remained. Most were damaged, drifting, their weapons silent. The rest were gone, swallowed by warped space, melted by plasma, or floating as silent tombs. On Earth, people watched the live feed in stunned silence. In markets, in schools, and hospitals, no one cheered. They stood still, holding each other, tears in their eyes. They had not wanted this war, but they had won it cleanly with courage and care. That was enough. Lisa Moore stood in the assembly hall listening to the final reports. She knew what came next. The Concord was broken, not just its fleet, but its myth. For thousands of years it had ruled by fear and tradition. Now the galaxy saw it for what it was: fragile, flawed, and fallible. She sent a message to every neutral system, every oppressed colony, every quiet observer. The Concord's reign is over. The choice is yours now. Join us in building something better or stay in the dark. Within days, replies came. The Mir declared independence. The Thalassians opened full diplomatic ties with Earth. Even some Cathari factions reached out asking for peace talks. Back at the Helios Rift, Daniel ordered his fleet to stand down. No pursuit, no destruction of surrendering ships, just a quiet presence holding the line. He looked out at the stars, at the wreckage floating like fallen leaves. He thought of the child from Proxima, of the crew of the Skyward Hope, of every human who had ever been told to kneel. Today they stood, and the galaxy would never forget it. The silence after the battle was louder than the war. Across the Orion Arm, worlds that had lived under the Concord's shadow for generations held their breath. No orders came from Viridia Prime. No patrols swept the lanes. No fines were issued, no judgments declared. The great machine of galactic control had stopped, and no one knew what would replace it. Then the envoys came. They arrived in broken ships, in patched-up shuttles, in vessels that had not flown in decades. Some came from species Earth had never heard of, small, quiet peoples who had hidden in the outer rings, surviving by staying unseen. Others came from former Concord members, their faces heavy with shame or hope. They did not bring weapons. They brought questions. What happens now? Lisa Moore met them all. Not in a grand hall, but in a simple dome on Luna, under a clear sky where Earth hung like a blue promise. She wore no uniform, no medals, just a plain gray suit and a calm voice. She listened more than she spoke. When the Mir Elder asked if humanity would take the Concord's place as rulers, she shook her head. "We don't want to rule," she said. "We want to share." The Thalassian delegate, her skin shimmering with nervous patterns, asked about reparations. Lisa replied, "You've suffered enough. We'll help you rebuild. Your cities, your farms, your future. No debt, no strings." Even the Cathari came. Not the warlords, but a new council of engineers, teachers, and healers who had opposed Zorath's cruelty. They brought data logs proving their leaders had hidden the truth about the Skyward Hope. Lisa accepted their apology but made one thing clear. Truth must be the foundation now, not power. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal, but it was a new kind of normal. Children played under skies no longer shadowed by fear. Factories that once built weapons now made water purifiers and solar arrays for rebuilding colonies. The orbital shipyards still worked, but their output shifted. Cargo haulers, medical frigates, science vessels. Humanity had proven it could fight. Now it would prove it could build. Daniel Hayes walked away from it all. He turned down every honor, every promotion. He took a small house in the hills of Montana, where the stars were still bright and the air smelled of pine. He fixed old engines, taught local kids how to navigate by the constellations, and tended a garden that never quite grew straight. Reporters came, hoping for grand speeches. He gave them none. "The war's over," he'd say. Let it stay that way, but he wasn't forgotten. Sometimes, late at night, a secure message would arrive. A question from a young pilot. A strategy puzzle from a new fleet commander. He'd answer quietly, then go back to his tomatoes. General Owen Carter became the first human to sit on the newly formed Stellar Assembly. It wasn't a council of rulers, but a circle of equals. Every species, no matter how small, had one voice. Decisions were made by consensus, not decree. Owen didn't speak often, but when he did, others listened. He pushed for open-source tech sharing, for joint disaster response teams, for schools where human children learned Mer history and Thalassian songs. Strength isn't in weapons, he told a gathering of young delegates. It's in trust. The ruins of Viridia Prime orbited a quiet star now, no longer a seat of power, but a memorial. Lisa chose it as the site for the signing of the new accord. On a clear day, with Earth's moon rising in the distance, representatives from over 50 worlds gathered. There were no thrones, no raised platforms, just a single table made from reclaimed hull metal of both human and Concord ships. Lisa stood and spoke simply. "You came here seeking our submission," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Now you will help us build something better. No more empires, no more councils that dictate from on high. A true alliance, equal, transparent, and voluntary." No one argued. No one demanded exceptions. They signed. Afterward, there was no feast, no parade. Just shared meals, quiet conversations, and the first joint mission. A team of human and Mer engineers heading to a damaged Thalassian world to repair their ocean filters. It was small. It was ordinary. And that was the point. Years passed. The scars of war faded, but the lessons remained. New trade routes opened, not controlled by one power, but managed by rotating councils. Emergency beacons now broadcast in 20 languages. And when a solar flare threatened a mining colony near Sirius, ships from 3 different species arrived within hours, not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. Humanity never took control of the galaxy. It didn't need to. By refusing to become what it had fought against, it earned something far more powerful: respect. In Montana, Daniel watched the night sky with a cup of coffee in his hand. A new starship, human-made but crewed by a mix of species, passed overhead, heading out to map unknown systems. He smiled faintly. They weren't going to conquer. They were going to learn, and that was enough. The galaxy had once feared human wrath. Now it leaned on human hope. And for the first time in centuries, the stars felt like home for everyone.